I'm Adam Cohen. I'm a senior researcher at the Mineta Transportation Institute at San Jose State University. And before I introduce our panel, I wanted to kind of do a little bit of level setting on this panel. So a little bit of background. Kind of AIAA organized an AAM task force a couple of years ago to identify key challenges on AAM integration, including multimodal integration, and how we could help kind of alleviate some of these concerns. And there's a real need to integrate advanced air mobility seamlessly with other forms of transportation. That's kind of the purpose of our conversation today. And so this task force started with a steering committee on kind of multimodal integration. And this panel is the first activity that was organized by that committee, jointly in collaboration with the modeling and simulation technical committee. So we're going to have this conversation today. Myself and then each of the panelists are going to have some introductory remarks. Our panel includes Ryan Naru of Joby Aviation, Brandon Rakes of Chehalis-Centralia Airport, and Reichart from Washington State DOT, and Ralph Tamburo of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. So we're going to have a really great, lively conversation today. So just kind of a little bit of level setting. When we talk about kind of advanced air mobility, we're really focusing in on a broad concept, which on emerging aviation markets and use cases for on-demand aviation. And this can include different built environments, such as urban, suburban, and rural, diverse use cases, such as passenger mobility, logistics, emergency services, and others, and innovative technologies, everything from short and vertical takeoff and landing to different propulsion types, such as electric, hydrogen, and sustainable aviation fuels, as well as piloted, remotely piloted, and autonomous configurations. Now, for those that may be not familiar with some of the work that I've done and that our team has done, we've done a lot of work on the surface transportation side as well. And I'd like to show a couple of these images here just to kind of help frame our conversation today. The image on the right was something that we developed for the US Department of Transportation, looking at kind of mobility hubs and kind of mobility areas. And so when we kind of talk about kind of transit-oriented development, or in the possible case of future vertiport-oriented development, we're really kind of focused on kind of three key areas. Kind of the core, where there could be a public transit station, maybe a vertiport, a destination of some sort, a government center. And there's typically kind of a 1 mile kind of radius around that, which is typically accessed walking and other modes of transportation. And then surrounding that, what we really see is kind of a zone, which is an area that can have different types of active transportation options, including biking, scooters, and similar types of services. And then there's kind of a broader catchment area that includes motorized forms of transportation. And something similar that the Bay Area Rapid Transit District in San Francisco has developed on the left is this framework for their station area access. And they have made it a policy priority to kind of prioritize walking and paratransit first, and to kind of deprioritize auto parking last as part of that kind of framework. And so it's kind of something to consider as we have our conversation today. Now, I like to kind of start off with kind of three images here. On the left are two images from the San Francisco Bay Area, San Francisco International Airport, as well as the Transbay Terminal. And on the right is kind of King's Cross Station over in London. And when we start kind of talking about integrating AAM with kind of multimodal transportation, it's really going to have different flavors, whether we're talking about on-airport versus off-airport locations. But in the off-airport locations, we really kind of want to start looking at kind of urban density, integration with the surrounding land uses, and other forms of transportation. So this hopefully will kind of help kind of our conversation today as as we talk about this. In addition to that, we recently published a study called Planning for Advanced Air Mobility. It was a partnership with the American Planning Association. What I think is, I believe, the first planning guide in this space. And one of the things that we looked at very closely was potential business and operational models, whether it be public versus kind of private or P3 models for operating vertiports. And we've also kind of taken some concepts in terms of curbside management and have applied those to advanced air mobility. So as we start having different use cases, different air carriers, and different operators out there, there may be a need to kind of help manage competition. And there's not necessarily one right or wrong way of doing that, but some of the ways this is done on the surface transportation side can include first come, first serve, access, lotteries and auctions, possibly preferential treatment for say, a particular use case, collaborative approaches, requests for proposals, and even tandem policies where we allocate public right-of-way equally. So this is something to also kind of consider as we have our conversation today. So kind of looking ahead, obviously there's a lot of interest here. There are some concerns about community impacts and public acceptance, which we'll talk about today. There's a little bit of uncertainty about what the role is of local and regional governments, so I'm hoping we'll kind of touch on that as well. And there's a real need for stakeholder and community engagement to ensure equitable outcomes, and the need for ongoing research, demonstrations, and proactive policy. So I've included a link here to the report. I encourage you to check out the full report, and I've included my contact information here as well. So I'd like to turn over the panel to our first speaker, Ryan, who will kind of give some introductory remarks.
Well, thank you, Adam. And I also want to thank the AIAA team who invited us here today. My journey in electric flight actually started 6 years ago at the AIAA Aviation Conference in Atlanta, Georgia, where I was lucky enough to have some research that I had done with Dr. Brian German published, just thinking about maintainability of electric aircraft and how that could be a differentiator, which began a long journey through Uber Elevate and now Joby Aviation over the last 5.5 years. I think that as we start this discussion, it's really important to think about what the product is, what the service is. And so, we kind of all mutually agreed, let's let Joby start, and then we can think about how do we plan to include that service in the multimodal context. And so, Joby is many things. And that's really going to be hard to summarize, but we'll just start really quickly with the aircraft. And why are we talking about this today? The Joby aircraft is engineered to unlock the skies, right? It's engineered to be a time machine. It's engineered to be a differentiated form of vertical aviation and mobility in our cities. We intend to operate this aircraft on trips up to 100 miles on speeds, either helicopter speeds if we have to on helicopter routes, or up to 150 knots indicated airspeed, about 200 miles an hour on the ground. The real differentiator though with this aircraft is going to be noise, right? This is really where community license starts to come in. Now, controversial opinion, but also fact. Electric aircraft, and in particular electric VTOL, are not quiet by default. We have to remember this. There's a lot of really exciting development in this space, but it actually takes meaningful engineering on the propulsion system side, on the full architecture, in order to achieve the incredibly low noise that is possible through electric propulsion. Joby's one of the only aircraft developers that has done really in-depth research along with NASA back in late 2020, early 2021 with their mobile acoustics facility to assess the noise of this aircraft. The data you're seeing on the screen right now is actually derived from the NASA national campaign work, and it helps us really outline how differentiated this is from a light helicopter like a Bell 206. I'll give you a chance to listen to it though. I believe Ralph has had the opportunity to also hear this aircraft in person and can validate that it is really that wow moment when the chase aircraft pulls away and suddenly the aircraft is undetectable. We also, for any of the skeptics out there, oh, that was just cruise flight, that's super quiet. Of course, cruise flight's quiet. I think, Ralph, you also had the opportunity to hear the aircraft at the downtown Manhattan heliport. I'll let you comment on that later. But it was transformative, I think, for the people who were observing it. But really what are we talking about is the service, right? Okay, well, we've done the engineering to develop an aircraft that can provide air mobility, right, with community license potentially, at least when it comes to the acoustic side. On the economic side, again, speaking from my maintainer background, we're talking about electric propulsion units that can be just removed and replaced from the aircraft, keeping the operational reliability really high, the uptime reliability really high. But what are we talking about in terms of the service? As a former Uber Elevate member, I keep going back to this video as really something that speaks to what we're all trying to achieve. There's a great example of some of the mobility hub concept that we were talking about. But really, as we kind of zoom out again, there's a personal story in this for me as well. So I lived in Newburgh, New York, basically my whole life, which is about an hour and a half north of the city by Metro North, the commuter railroad to and from Grand Central Station. And that meant my dad, who lived with us in Newburgh, but commuted to New York City every day, was taking 3 hours of commuter rail every day on top of whatever his last mile was from Grand Central to his office. So let's call it a 3.5 to 4 hour commute depending on the day. What does that mean? Unfortunately, there was a lot of things that he missed, right, in our lives because he had to take those meetings and then he had to come home and he was coming home late. For me, developing this product means that people like my dad will have an opportunity maybe once a week, once a month, right, to be able to take this service, to have the option to get home, to essentially get that time back. And integrating it with commuter rail is something that I think is a great opportunity. We talk a lot about the essentially airport shuttle route. I think that there's a lot of opportunity here too in New York. If you live in Long Island, you know that there's still not great railroad service to the airports. You can do it. It requires a few transfers. Well, what if at Huntington Station there was a park and fly and get you right to JFK? There's a really interesting opportunity there. We did this at Uber Elevate. We showed that it was possible to essentially bring many riders together, each on their own individual trips, magically connect them through the app-based service. That way we were able to pool riders, have high load factors, and deliver folks that magical experience. This is essential, especially with the airport shuttle mission. But as we talk about, what does mobility across a region potentially look like? What does the commute mission look like? I think that we all know that Uber has an interest with Joby as far as that first and last mile goes, making sure that this is a seamless origin to destination trip, not just the air mobility trip. But there's certainly many other modes that you can use to get to the aviation infrastructure. We were talking in the back room, and we were speaking essentially about how multimodal services connecting to other types of transportation infrastructure is going to be kind of a theme of this panel. And Adam, I know that you can't believe it, but we threw a little analysis together for you in just about 20 minutes. 2007, New York Times, Amanda Cox, Matthew Erickson put together an analysis of Metro North, Long Island Railroad, New Jersey Transit, exploring essentially the travel times to each of the stations. This is old. This is 2007, so it's probably not gotten better. And what they did was essentially in these concentric rings, they have travel times in terms of minutes, 60 minutes, 75 minutes, 90 minutes. And so what I just did here is I layered color-coded, with purple being 60 minutes, with green being 75 minutes, and red being 90 minutes, an overlay of that data from the New York Times onto our Long Island Railroad map. But we also have to respect real airspace. We can't just go as the crow flies. And so you're going to say, Ryan, well, wait a minute. I thought these aircraft could only go 100 miles. Is it even possible to serve these missions? Well, you bet. Again, a little quick Google mapping will show that it's totally possible to do these missions. We can do the 60-minute commute time mission on a 36-mile flight. We can serve the folks out in Patchogue, a 90-minute commute, 55-mile flight. That's like 15 minutes, essentially, in the air. And we'll have the first and last mile as well. So the time-saving potential is huge if we co-locate, park, and fly just to get to the east side heliport, right? What if we were going to the North Shore? I think that what really surprised me about the North Shore is that the distances between some of those final stations is very short, but these are very circuitous rail lines. They're usually single-tracked. There's a lot of delays. There's grade crossings. Enormous potential here on, let's just say, a 45-mile journey, 90 minutes. How about that 25-mile journey, 75 minutes? So we're starting to see, look, air mobility is something we should be incorporating into people's everyday lives, something that they're familiar with. If you're traveling to and from a rail station, you can also take air mobility. This is Huntington Station in Long Island. And I think that one of the things you'll recognize here is mobility infrastructure, right, in terms of parking. Now, look, I think we all think transit-oriented development is on the horizon. There's a lot of policy that's coming into play in New York State to make sure that our access to rail is co-located with businesses, with residential properties, more dense residential properties in particular. Parking garages like this are also a great opportunity to include air mobility, make those transit-oriented development projects even more attractive. So just some food for thought in today's presentation. We are also looking beyond the battery electric aircraft into hydrogen. Let me just be clear. Joby is not pivoting away from the battery electric aircraft project. We are on the cusp of certification in the next year or two, which is really important to us to serve these missions. But we are also exploring hydrogen electric aircraft. And in the last 2 weeks have flown, I think, 4 times now, 550 miles. On a hydrogen electric technical demonstrator aircraft, an aircraft not even fit for purpose, but that was able to VTOL and do that kind of distance. It again begins to speak to what the opportunities are in electric flight and being able to decarbonize aviation. Last shot, and I'll throw in a joke. My wife says, wait a minute, you're gonna chemtrail people? No, that's liquid water coming out of the hydrogen electric technical demonstrator, and we're really, really thrilled about the progress we've made here. Thanks for that. I think that tees up the conversation, and I'll pass it over.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much. So it is really great to be following Joby with their presentation and Ryan, because a lot of the work that they've done has inspired me with what we've been doing. We really, and with Uber Elevate as well. So it's going to be kind of fun to talk about this stuff with them up here too. So we are just concluding our master plan update for the Chehalis-Centralia Airport. So we're located right between Portland and Seattle, right on I-5. And what we're looking at is something that, how do we connect all of this stuff with our communities? It's one of those things, if we look at the greatest export from the community that I live in, we always say it's the children, it's the youth. And unfortunately in our community, and I know this is a story that I'm sure is familiar with a lot of communities, the kids go to good schools locally. It's an underserved community, but they're good schools, good families, and when the kids graduate from school, they have to move away for work. We're between the Seattle market and the Portland market. If we could find a way to make that commute a couple of days a week, and then they work remote 3 days a week. All of a sudden, advanced air mobility could fill a niche for that, and this could elevate our entire community because we can keep those folks in our community, keep the young people in our community, raise the median household income, like from where we live. You could work on the Microsoft campus, for example, and make that commute and have a 30 or 40-minute commute to Microsoft. Still live in Centralia or Chehalis area. Now you've raised the median household income, you've added youthful vitality to the social scene and all of that, and this just raises the entire economy. So I've got a little video presentation that we prepared that shows a vision of what our master plan update is like. And so if we could just tee that up, and I'll walk you through a little bit of this. So. And so what you're seeing right here is just coming off of Interstate 5, right between Seattle and Portland. This is a commercial area that is on airport property, and you're going by some of the local businesses. So you can see there's a Walmart on the left, a Sonic on the right. And so this is close to real-time driving to see how you would get there. In this area here, we'll take a left turn coming up. And as you approach the area here, we're going to look off to the left, and what you'll see is a hydrogen storage area and a hydrogen refueling area. So this is something that in our community we're working on already. Lewis County already has 3 hydrogen fuel cell buses, and they're working on a hydrolyzer right now. So we're looking to follow that model. Here you can see additional parking for somewhat of a park and ride type scenario in our community. And we're looking at a dedicated advanced air mobility on the northeast corner of our airport. So here you can see our terminal. And we want to show this also as a hub for the community as well. So you'll notice that we have a cafe inside the terminal building. And here you can see some Joby analog aircraft. These are not Joby.
Well, if you asked air traffic a couple years ago what we were, they would have called it a flying saucer. So
there we go.
Very appropriate.
And so this shows how we could integrate this onto our field. Now, as we pan back off to the left, you'll see we have our existing runway. We have a 5,000 foot long runway. And then you'll see all of that development. So what we're proposing at our facility is a dedicated facility for advanced air mobility. Part of our philosophy that developed with this is innovate, integrate, replicate. And so what we're trying to do at Chehalis is come up with a way that we could integrate something like this to help support infrastructure that could be useful for advanced air mobility, whether it's Joby or other manufacturers along the way as well. So that's what I've got for the presentation. So I'll pass it off to Anne to introduce herself. And I don't know if you'll need this, but there you go.
I don't have any slides, so you're all stuck with just looking at me. I apologize about that. I started my career in aviation in the 80s in Alaska. I worked for several small Part 135 charter scheduled charter companies. So what that meant was we were the lifeblood from Fairbanks to the villages. And so we would ship them their toilet paper and groceries and bring people into the big city if they had doctor's appointments or something like that. Not only did that interest me in a career in aviation, but it really focused my mind on how important aviation is to provide connectivity to the rest of the world, to remote rural communities. So I've kind of focused on that concept throughout my career. But I left Alaska and decided that I wanted to be an airport manager. So I have managed small airports across the country, in Oregon, to New York, we were talking about that earlier, and even in Kansas, so literally all across the country, but always been focused on kind of that small community air service development idea where my major speech thing I would always give to the community is that an airport isn't a transportation facility, it's an economic development tool. And so by having the ability to connect, again, rural communities to the business centers, that provides vitality to that community, a lot along the lines of what Brandon was just talking about, that people don't have to leave the community in order to get, good jobs. And it's really the health and the future of communities. Well, now, as aviation has moved forward, we're kind of stuck with this, aviation's got a bad rap. It's pretty well known that aviation is the most polluting transportation mode. And so there's some of those environmental kind of groups, which I hate even saying that. I'm a native Oregonian, I work for the state of Washington right now, but I grew up recycling and, trying to figure out how we can reduce our footprint. And so it kind of hurts me that aviation has this reputation as being, a bad mode. So here I took this job as the aviation director for the state of Washington just about a year ago, and that's all the background that I brought to this. But one of the big challenges that I was given to figure out how to fix is that Seattle-Tacoma International Airport is at capacity and there's no more room to grow. But the people are still moving in. It's a beautiful area and there's need for more aviation type of transportation in the region. There was a group before I took this position that said, yep, I know how we need to fix it. We need to build a new large hub airport in the Puget Sound region. So they did a site selection study and tried to come up with where is the perfect place in this developing, gorgeous natural area where we can build a new airport and everybody would love it. And here's the surprise, there isn't a place like that. They came up with, I think, 5 different sites and every single one had very well-educated neighborhood groups that said, we don't want an airport in our backyard. And that's where I came in and took over this position. And the legislature said, okay, well, we have to have good transportation, so how are we going to make it work? As a lifelong aviation professional, it's kind of funny that it seemed obvious to me that a true multimodal approach is the way to make it work. Brandon was just talking about Interstate 5, which is the interstate that runs from Vancouver, Canada to Mexico along the whole West Coast. And in the Seattle to Portland area, it's a mess. Sometimes you can drive through at the speed limit, but many times not. And it's hard to know exactly when you can drive through and when you can't. And to me, that's part of the congestion problem at SeaTac that has to be fixed. There's a group that's also brand new within the Washington State Department of Transportation that's working on a high-speed rail corridor, kind of following the same route as I-5. And from my time living in New York, though it was upstate, there's a lot of people in New York City that go through their entire life without ever having a driver's license because there's so many other ways to get around. But on the West Coast, people are not ready to think that way at all. So I think that's one of the things we're going to have to overcome is, okay, if we want to continue to have a beautiful natural environment where people want to move in because the livability is so great, we're going to have to change our culture a little bit. We're going to have to be comfortable with being on high-speed rail. But if we could add this advanced air mobility element to it so that we could just skip SeaTac altogether. And the other thing about the region is we've got a whole bunch of islands in this Puget Sound area. From the slide we saw of the Uber Elevate plan, I saw there that there was a route from Boston to Martha's Vineyard, which I also used to manage the Martha's Vineyard Airport. And there's times there when there's high seas and the same thing, very similar to my experience in Alaska. The grocery stores wouldn't have the toilet paper or the beer that you needed because the ferries from the mainland couldn't get over. And I would always say, well, there's an airport. There's all kinds of ways we can still make this work. So for the islands, I think that's an obvious opportunity to use multiple modes of transportation to make a seamless trip for people. And so here's one thing I'm thinking, and this is just an example, but from one of the islands in the Seattle area, you take an eVTOL to one of our developing airports that's not SeaTac, and then if we also work with carriers to provide good service from that airport to a different hub, then these people from the island have a great way to get to wherever they're going without having to drive on I-5 to get to SeaTac where everything's a disaster. And it really is a smooth trip for people. So that's my interest. That's what I'm looking at. That's more at the advanced air mobility thing. The urban air mobility side of it, which was kind of what you were showing in New York City, Long Island area, if we could have, if you could fly like from your neighborhood to the downtown area to see a show, or in Seattle to, watch them throw the fish at Pike Place Market or something like that, and get rid of all of the cars. So you didn't have a big parking lot everywhere, vertiport that would be served by maybe Uber and Lyft, but they wouldn't be parking. We don't need parking lots. They're taking you to wherever you're going. Or the e-bikes, the scooters, those sorts of things. Takes a big change in mindset. But the world that I envision is beautiful, and it allows us to enjoy our areas and the natural beauty of it. So we are really concerned about kind of changing the culture and getting people accustomed to doing these different things. So we're working at the Washington Department of Transportation with city planners, those kind of people to kind of look at, okay, what is the noise footprint? How is this going to be better? How can we plan for vertiports and drone docking stations and things like that in a way that nobody can say, oh no, I don't want that in my neighborhood. That's kind of a heavy lift, and particularly when, we're a bunch of geeks here in Las Vegas talking about all of this stuff, but the normal people out there are thinking, well, this is some kind of science fiction. This isn't going to happen in my life. So we're trying to talk about it, normalize it, paint the picture of what the world can be like if we put this all together. So kind of an interesting role, but it's fun too. And particularly, I do a lot of listening to what are people's concerns, how do we make this work, and having people in all different aspects of this industry talk together is really, really helpful to me. Recently we were talking to a group of OEMs and they were kind of saying, oh yeah, and your idea, except we want to take those people from the island to SeaTac, and also we can't, the energy structure of the aircraft doesn't work to be holding in the pattern. So we need to have ATC priority so that we can get on the ground right away. And also at this little tiny airport on the island, or vertiport, we have to have TSA. And so all of a sudden I'm thinking, well, that's all not gonna work. So this is the time when we all put these thoughts together and figure out, okay, we can do this, we can make this work. So yeah, those are my opening comments, but I'm really interested to hear all of us how we can put it together. Ralph.
Thanks, Ann. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Ralph Tamboro. I'm with the Port Authority of New York, New Jersey. I've been with them for 11 years. In my prior life, I was an air traffic controller. Like Ann, I started my career in the 80s, so you can guess how old I am. But I was an air traffic controller for 31 years and now transitioned over into the airport operations side. So I'm very passionate about the New York area, if you can't tell. Some of the things that Ryan said really did hit home, as I do ride one of those rail systems every day, and I can vouch for the 60 minutes it takes me to get 25 miles. But conversely, if I drove that 25 miles, it probably would take me closer to 2 hours. We have seen a significant change in the New York area, and after COVID, it has actually gotten much worse. This was validated. The Port Authority also operates bridges and tunnels. Our bridges and tunnels reached 100% capacity while our rail system was at 50%. So it just validated the fact that people were driving into the city, even though it's very expensive to park, it didn't really matter. You may have heard about congestion pricing. That's gone away for a couple of years, but I do expect that we'll see that back as well, which again leads to advanced air mobility. There's another option because of the additional cost that commuters may experience. So on this slide here, this is an actual photograph of the demo of the Joby aircraft back in 2023, that was. It was a great event. I could definitely vouch that the aircraft was quiet, because the only aircraft you could hear were the helicopters that were waiting to land while Joby finished their demo. So there was a couple of community groups there as well, and they were also equally impressed with the quietness of the aircraft. They did say, though, yeah, that's 2026, what are you gonna do for me now? So I do remember that line, but it was very interesting to see, and very interesting to see their response. Okay, so this is a quick picture of New York. This is a 24-hour period. I like to say that there's 5 major airports in New York, besides the one that everybody knows, Newark, LaGuardia, and Kennedy. There's also Teterboro and White Plains, which are Teterboro is a busy general aviation airport, but mostly business jets operate out of there. Westchester's mixed, business jets, small general aviation, and also several air carriers operate out of Westchester. So on a typical day, we do between 4,600 and 5,000 operations. That's every single day. So you could look at this and say there's no way advanced air mobility is going to work in this. I mean, it's very easy for people to think that way, but I'm here to tell you that it can work. And that's really what my job function is right now. So some of the things that we're looking at, I'll mention Uber Elevate. That's how I first got involved with Ryan and his team. We did look how that operated in and out of our airports, specifically JFK. There were several other companies operating a similar service, and they still do that today. And right now we're doing about 40 or 50 operations between Manhattan and JFK every single day. And that's at a pretty high price point. Helicopters are not very cheap to operate. They are also, as we all know, very noisy. And we do, even though we don't really get involved in helicopter noise, we're more focused on aircraft noise, which is also one of my job functions. Helicopters do come up quite often in discussions with the local community groups. COVID obviously put a damper on the operation, especially from our side. We had to refocus some of our energies on the airports. What do we have to do to maintain the runways? But it's good to see that we are back. We are actually back to pre-COVID levels, and JFK is actually exceeding pre-COVID levels. There's no shortage of demand for passengers in New York. One other thing that Ryan mentioned was some of these trips down to DC. I was lucky enough to ride Amtrak many, many times to DC. 3.5 hours later, I would get there. Advanced air mobility would be the perfect resolution for that. There's plenty of people going back and forth to DC on a daily basis. I would love to do that trip where it's not a 15-hour day. That would be a great advantage. And it also would help the airport's operation because we do have quite a bit of flights between those two airports, DCA and LaGuardia, DCA Newark, DCA JFK. And if we could relieve some of that demand from those flights, that could open up demand for other flights that we definitely need.
So, Ralph, let me interject here real quick. So from your perspective at the Port Authority, what kind of are the primary challenges that you see integrating AAM with ground transportation?
So with ground transportation, obviously what we do now with the helicopters is we go from the helipad, one of the 3 helipads in Manhattan, and we go, let's say, to JFK. Let's pick on JFK. We're at the FBO. It's not in the best location. So then they drop off the passengers. Passengers have to go from airside to landside, get in a vehicle, and then be driven to the terminal. With all the construction that's going on at JFK, could take quite a while. So that's part of the issue. My vision, or I'll say even our vision at the Port Authority, is to have somewhere that is conveniently located. We're very interested in passenger experience. If you've been to one of our airports recently and seen the modifications of the terminals that we have done, customer experience is a huge emphasis for us.
Do you envision kind of integrating AAM at off-airport locations, say ferry terminals?
Yes, we have talked quite a bit about actually doing something like Jamaica Station. That's a major hub for the Long Island Railroad. Why can't you land on a platform there or a vertiport there, jump on the air train to get to JFK, or you can jump on a Long Island Railroad and get to Penn Station. Because the one thing, if you land at an airport, especially our Port Authority airports, your price point is going to be pretty high. There's obviously going to be extra charges, but if you land outside the airport, all you have to do is pay for the air train ride into the airport, and it would save you a tremendous amount of time.
And what are your thoughts in terms of integrating with other modes of transportation from WashDOT's perspective?
I'm actually a little bit frustrated working with the surface mode planners because they're pretty set on what they're doing. And for them, they're working on electric cars and the kind of autonomous ganging of trucks, which is interesting stuff. But when I, try and talk with them about, so how do we make this connectivity with, aviation, eVTOLs, that once again, I mentioned earlier that people talk about, oh, this is science fiction, it's not gonna happen in my life. That's kind of what I hear from the from the highway planners. So I kind of stumbled upon Washington State Ferries, and thanks for mentioning the ferries, because they are really interested. And in Washington State right now, they're working on converting the whole statewide fleet of ferries to electric. So then when they're talking about, okay, we need to like redesign the ferry terminals so that they include charging for the ferries. Now that becomes a place where, okay, let's put a vertiport there too. And then when you get off the ferry, you can go to, your next destination or whatever. I don't think that'll make a little difference. But one of the things that I'm also concerned about that I mentioned before was changing the mindset of the public and building some kind of comfort around this new way of doing transportation. So if we start small by kind of linking with the ferries, that might be the way that people go, oh yeah, this works, that's not so bad.
So I just want to remind the audience that we do have conference IO available. So if you have questions, feel free to submit those. Maybe we can kind of put up that code on the screen if we can get that QR code up. And let me kind of piggyback on this. So you said that there's difficulty working with surface modes of transportation, okay? And unfortunately, we don't really have a lot of strong representation on this panel from folks that work only in surface transportation. So I'm going to throw out a question, perhaps maybe on their behalf, okay? Play devil's advocate here. I think some folks in surface transportation might ask the question that, AAM is a niche market, both in terms of affordability. The aircraft is relatively small, by and large, and the volumes are small. So for them, I think there might be some folks on the surface transportation side that don't necessarily understand the value proposition or the importance of why these modes should be integrated together. Can the panel kind of touch on kind of that and why it might be important?
I'll start. I don't think that they're wholly off base. When you think about, to a hammer, everything is a nail, right? If you're a surface transportation planner, you are talking in big B, billions of dollars for the planning projects. You are talking in, throughput numbers that are probably mind-boggling. And so when you try and contextualize what their challenges are versus some of these new opportunities that private companies are hoping to offer to communities to supplement their existing modes, to increase the economic competitiveness and interconnection between communities within a region, it probably sounds like, okay, that's great. I have to deal with that first, and then maybe 10 other things that are in the queue. And that's not a problem. It's not really a huge problem. I think that, you spoke to many of the funding mechanisms that are going to be at play to bring infrastructure, that will support advanced air mobility into reality. Well, first and foremost, there is existing infrastructure, right? In New York City, the existing heliports, the existing airports. Ralph, you spoke about the 5 that are within 17 miles. Well, there's also Republic, there's Farmingdale, there's Stewart, there's Morristown, there's Linden, right? There's an enormous potential to utilize vertical aviation from those sites. And vertical aviation uniquely can operate in a very, very flexible way to not disrupt the existing operations at those sites, right? We don't want to be sitting for a half hour on the taxiway at Republic. It's a very busy airport. It's a very busy general aviation airport. Vertical aviation uniquely unlocks the untapped potential of that existing infrastructure. I think that then earns the initial license and draw from folks in the community who are starting to realize what the potential of this service is. And you kind of build from there. I think private funding is going to be a really big deal, especially for an unproven, untested product. And I can tell you that my firm in particular is eyes open about that. But there is a lot of excitement, especially around starting from existing, crawl, walk, run through your new sites. When I look at, again, just Long Island, only Long Island. Some of the things that we didn't talk about, we did talk about the commuter rail. New Jersey, for me, as someone who lives in Limbrook, Long Island, I'm pretty close to the city. Forget about it. I'm not going to New Jersey. No way. I'm going to deal with the Belt Parkway, Staten Island, Verrazano Bridge, Goethals Bridge, and that just gets me into New Jersey, right? Well, if I have friends, family, I know I do, that are only 2 hours, 2.5 hours away, but through all that traffic jam, I'm not going to see them, right? I think that we're going to start being able to tell personal family stories about the connectivity that this kind of service can offer, even if it's not taken every day. From the airline's perspective, consider if you are an airline, I'll just speak for Joby for right now, that anchors itself at JFK or LaGuardia, and you don't really have operations at Newark. Well, you've just seeded an enormous market potential to the operators at Newark, because those folks are not going to commute, again, through Staten Island, over the Belt Parkway, all the way to JFK just to connect to a flight at JFK. They're going to go to Newark. Well, what if advanced air mobility gives that airline the opportunity to compete for those customers, right? Or it gives the airports, like the Port Authority as an authority that manages many airports, opportunities to work with their airline partners to manage demand, to manage folks. That's the vision, right? And so, yes, surface transportation folks, they're thinking about the roads. I think us on the airport planning side are thinking about the skies, and maybe folks, like Joby, we're thinking about how do we connect people? How do we connect communities?
One thing that is nice about advanced air mobility is it doesn't necessarily have to have a really heavy infrastructure initially. The amount of infrastructure that we have early on doesn't have to be very dedicated. Like in our master plan, we do have a dedicated facility for advanced air mobility, and a lot of that's just to separate our traffic, where we can keep air taxi, air charter on one side and GA on the other. And we have an opportunity to do that right between Seattle and Portland. So for us, it makes sense, but at a lot of airports, Washington State, for example, we have, 130 public use airports? That is some existing infrastructure that we can take advantage of initially that helps to provide access to those. And then I think as we show that business case and when people start to see that value, hopefully those dollars will flow and also provide data for the state to know where to put the money and for investors where to put the money. So hopefully that helps to solve that problem.
Now, some have suggested that vertiports could be kind of multimodal hubs for EV charging, staging areas for shared AVs, and connection points for shared mobility and public transit. Are any of you kind of considering kind of these types of multimodal connections?
I don't, yeah, sorry. I know we are at ours, and for a relatively small general aviation airport, it's a major component of ours. So where we're looking at electrification and hydrogen, those are things that I would bet today that if we were to have hydrogen production 10 years from now and we have vehicles using it, we will use far more hydrogen for the terrestrial vehicles than we will for the aviation sector. And that's not a bad thing. That's something we can actually take advantage of if we can produce and resell that hydrogen on site, which is something that we would like to be able to do. That's some economic resiliency for us where we would have an opportunity to actually not only serve that multimodal, but also help support ourselves. So that's part of what we're looking at is electrification and hydrogen right there.
Okay.
So electrification for us is a huge project as well. All of our ground vehicles are going to be converted to electric. Our terminals, again, are becoming larger and larger, a lot of electrical demand. So we are looking at ways, how are we going to power all this electric demand? That's one of the things that we're looking at. As far as having something like that on the airport, I will admit it's a little difficult on the New York airports, particularly an airport like LaGuardia. There's very little space even for the normal air traffic. Newark has some potential areas where we could build a staging area, but that has to go into planning. Right now we're redoing our air train. We're talking about possibly adding a platform to our air train station. That could be a charging location. Easy to get to the various terminals at Newark. JFK poses a little bit more of a challenge. There's a lot of redevelopment work going on right now, but there are a lot of areas that we could potentially have, staging areas. We also manage Stewart. It's a little bit further away. It's up by Newburgh, but it's about 60 miles flying. but that could potentially be an area. There's a lot of space. It's an ex-Air Force base, so it's a very large airport, not currently a lot of activity, but that also could be in the future where advanced air mobility helps us transition between ground vehicles to air as well.
Now, you know, one of the things I find kind of interesting, I'm a planner by trade, and I find that there's maybe a little bit of a disconnect between kind of the aviation community and kind of metropolitan planning organizations, in part just because the funding structure is different. You know, are you coordinating with MPOs, or is that something you guys are planning on doing in the future in the context of kind of AAM or your airport planning?
So one thing that we've learned over the last couple of years, you know, especially when we have a major snowstorm, you know, our focus was always runways and taxiways, right? You have to make sure you get those open, right? We'd get them open, and there was nobody could get to the airport. So we started to shift our focus that we have to work closely with the MTA. Are the roads going to be open? Are the rail system is running, a bus is running. This was an important part because we spent so much effort in getting that runway back, and then there's nobody that could use it. And also the employees. Employees couldn't get to the airport. So you can't run an airport without employees, right? So it is very critical. We are in the process of working with the various groups in New York City in particular, but we're a bi-state agency, so we're also reaching out to the New Jersey side, because the only way this will work effectively is if we all work together on it. Ann mentioned that we have a great transportation system, which we do, but if you really look at it, it's missing connection parts. If I had to go to Newark by train, and I'm in downtown Manhattan, it's 3 trains. I mean, it's 20 miles and I have to switch twice to get to Newark Airport. Yeah. Kennedy is 2 trains. LaGuardia is a train and a bus. So even though it is a very good transportation system, especially if you live in Manhattan, Manhattan is great. You could never own a car there, but it's not really well connected, and it's so difficult now and so expensive to connect it, where I think advanced air mobility could help that in certain areas.
Now, let me pose a question to you. Okay. You know, I've done a lot of work with Mark Dowd over the years. He worked over at MTA. I think some of the concerns from the transit community, let's take Manhattan, for example. I think some of the concerns is that people are going to take air mobility from lower Manhattan to the Upper East Side, and just that's going to be their new trip. They might have taken it on transit. They might have taken it, you know, in a black car or a taxi. And instead, we're just kind of shifting travel behavior from the ground to the air. What would you say to those folks that are concerned about that?
Well, and I will say that is a possibility. But I think when that would occur, you know, we're talking many years in the future, where air mobility would be more frequent. You know, flights, you know, it's like some of those videos we just saw where the flights are always in the air. Initially, you know, it's not going to be that. You're going to have very limited access. You know, the real focus right now is New York City to the airports. Every study that has been done, that is what they talk about, because it's known demand, right? So if you're just starting, what do you want? You want to make sure that you have demand for your service. I can tell you that is going to happen. Where we really need to start focusing on is the things that Ryan mentioned about these satellite airports. You know, Southern Connecticut has plenty of airports that could feed the New York airports easily. In fact, several airlines tried that years ago, but they couldn't fill a small commuter airplane, but an eVTOL they can easily fill and save a lot of, you know, that this is also a sustainability benefit, getting some of the cars off the roads as well.
You know, I think that, you know, from my perspective, it's not about competing with these types of, you know, commuter rail or other types of transit, buses, subways. It's about complementing them, right? I think if you can make, again, it's back to transit-oriented development. If you can make your transit hubs that much more attractive from a transportation perspective, it increases the value of the real estate. Everyone loves to talk about walkable communities. Well, the reason people love walkable communities is because there's usually transit associated with it, right? That can get you from the community where you don't really want to own a car to the other community where you don't necessarily need to own a car. The thing about the Elevate vision was take that concept that's currently stitched together on path-based infrastructure and move it to network-based transportation, where as soon as you open another node, you are connected to every other node in the network. I imagine a future where I can go from Staten Island to the Bronx, right, in these connected communities and not have to really worry about that. Again, it's just another one of these trips. I'm sorry, the New Yorker in me is coming out, but it's one of these unimaginable trips today. I would not ever think about wanting to do that. But they're in the same 5 boroughs,
Right.
right? This is one community, at least in terms of governance. But folks don't really get to go to the restaurants in Staten Island if they're from the Bronx or from Queens. They don't get to, exchange, ideas and commerce and culture readily. And so to give folks that opportunity, again, it doesn't have to be every day. Once in a while, that's a great vision. That doesn't compete with transit. Yeah. There's no train from Staten Island on the Staten Island Railroad that's going to get you to Queens. It's going to get you to Bronx. So yeah, I think that finding ways to build on the networks we have rather than directly compete is the vision.
Yeah, I think treating it as a new mode of transportation, not just air, right, but treat this as a new mode of transportation that'll be more accessible to the communities and used differently than what we're seeing for traditional helicopters, for example. So,
And you wanted to respond.
Yeah, I wanted to switch this conversation off of the New York City area a little bit and get back to these remote communities because there are tribal lands where they have real concerns that the distances are so great and there's so little development that, if you get in a car wreck or, you need an ambulance or even just things like, the refrigerator repairman needs to come up to your house or whatever, that people die because they can't get emergency services fast enough. Obviously, the Maytag repairman isn't one of those things, but those are the things that, why would you want to live there if you got to wait forever for your refrigerator to get fixed? So I want to remember that we're not just talking about rich people with disposable income that can afford these different modes, but also access to really important services to small communities.
That's such an important conversation. A couple of things come to mind, first of all. I think that what really unlocks the potential of air mobility is that now certain trips that were not either cost competitive by helicopter or environmentally viable because of the noise or emissions, suddenly you can start actually engaging in a discussion about air mobility being an option. The cost side of longer distance regional mobility, let's say hydrogen electric connecting places that are a long way away but not major urban centers, it's going to still be hard, right? No one's going to fool you on that. These aircraft are economical when they're used very frequently. That said, right, you can look at a model like Essential Air Service, maybe take it again from a federal level though and shrink it to the state level.
Absolutely.
Right, and it doesn't have to be a very expensive program to actually make a meaningful difference and incentivize companies like Joby to start thinking, hey, that's a really important route. Now that's a profitable route. I'm going to go fly that route. Just maybe one last thing on this. Joby is really excited to be a 21st century aviation company, right? The electric age of aviation, but also the autonomy age of aviation. We just recently acquired X-Wing, so brought in another whole brain trust of folks. When you start combining the opportunities available with autonomy plus hydrogen plus, right, all kinds of economic spaces open up that maybe weren't available before. Things that might also be a lot easier in non-urban environments, especially when it comes to novel, air traffic management or pilot concepts.
And I want to tag onto that a little bit because I think we've got an opportunity right now that AAM can fill a gap in the market, and that's the airlines are finding that they can make a lot more money filling up big airplanes flying to large hubs than they can the regional aircraft. So regional aircraft are going away, and the small commercial service airports like I used to manage are losing service. And so, you know, when Ralph was talking about the small airports in Connecticut that couldn't fill up a 737, we've got this opportunity now. What a great opportunity, both for the service providers and for the communities to say, yeah, we could, 4 or 6 people at a time, yeah, we could do that.
So one of the things that comes up is kind of demonstrations and kind of impact assessment. What kinds of impacts do you think we need to kind of evaluate early to help kind of guide safe, sustainable, and equitable outcomes? What kinds of metrics should we be looking at? What kinds of things should we be doing?
I was just thinking about that, so I'll jump in on this. And this is, I'm an airport manager, same as Brandon, so this comes from a kind of boring engineering, geeky standpoint, but we really need to look at the land use regulations and standards and what this all means. And what I was just thinking about today is from some of my highway colleagues that I'm sorry I was bad-mouthing them earlier, but I've learned from them just recently that the guardrails on the side of the highway that keep you from, crashing into whatever's on the other side, those weren't designed for electric cars, and the batteries are so heavy that if you crash into one of those guardrails, it's not going to perform the way it was supposed to. So then that makes me think, okay, at these small GA airports that we're talking about, developing into AAM hubs or whatever, are electric aircraft, hydrogen aircraft, is that going to change the construction standards like runway separation or safety area needs or things like that? And I'm expecting that as we enter into this new industry, we're going to have some failures that we learn from, which is kind of scary. But so let's start thinking about those weird things that seem boring that you don't want to think about.
Well, that's one of our major concerns, right? We obviously have to be cautious in how we develop this. The growth in New York is going to happen. We know that. Once this service is offered, actually managing the growth, I think, is going to be our challenge. Because there's many companies like Joby that want to operate out of the heliports to the airports. So there may not be a lot of eVTOLs flying around, but when you have 5 to 10 companies that want to do it, there may be more than we expect. So the concern is, obviously safety. We have to really consider that. How does that affect the airport? If in the event there was an accident or a fire, how does that affect the airport operations? From a sustainability standpoint, there's a lot of metrics there, a lot of interest from the communities on this. We have one of the busiest helicopter corridors in the world with the Hudson River. And these communities hearing the helicopters going back and forth, this is a big issue for them. We've done outreach. We go out to the communities. In fact, Joby did a presentation for one of them, very well received. People are interested in knowing what's coming. Electric aircraft, they're quieter. They do, and they voice their concerns. Are they going to see more of them? Yes, they're quieter, but is there going to be 50 of these flying over my house every hour? So I think there's a lot of things that we need to look at, in particular the community side of this.
Now, I know the panel can't see the questions, but I'm going to cover one of the questions here. Some of the audience members have asked about kind of aircraft size and whether or not kind of maybe upsizing the aircraft makes it maybe more or less able to integrate with other forms of transportation. Can you kind of speak to that a little bit, Ryan?
Yeah, sure. So the aircraft that we've built, the one pilot 4-passenger aircraft is the right-sized aircraft for the economic mission that we're trying to serve with a battery electric aircraft. There is a diminishing return, right, to range when it comes to a battery electric aircraft, when it comes to what is the total addressable market as I progress that next mile out, right? The reality is density drops off as you get further and further away from cities, at least their city cores. And so the aircraft that we've envisioned for the, let's say, 100-mile mission or less, this is the right size. It also, is the right size for noise, right? As we begin to upsize aircraft, right, there are things you can do to keep them more quiet, but the aircraft class that we've built, about 50 feet across, about 5,500 pounds, that's where we can keep things almost undetectable. You start getting bigger with battery electric, you start losing some of those capabilities. The other thing too is, if you look at a lot of the aviation infrastructure, the heliports, again, sorry, New York, those heliports are really aimed around a design aircraft like an S-76, right? 47 to 55 foot rotor diameter aircraft. You start breaching that and you're suddenly talking about maybe 2 pads being simultaneously used. Well, now your landing fee just doubled, right? And so we have to really be mindful of what is the environment we're going to be operating in, and is the aircraft fit for purpose? Hydrogen aircraft, we don't know what the final configuration is going to look like. It's a different design space, but it will operate in different places. It won't go to every single node on the battery electric network. So more to come.
So I want to talk a little about kind of technology and data challenges for a minute. What kinds of data do we need to share between kind of the AAM ecosystem and surface transportation?
Okay, well, I'll jump in on that. Already since the 80s, when we started doing airport planning, there's some amazing information that's available on what the market is, how many people you have going to various places, and that's all because we're all tracking your cell phone. And so that's the kind of thing, when I think about multimodal planning, we know how many people are going from point A to point B, and so with that information, then we can start to figure out, okay, which modes are the best way to serve what they're doing. And that's information that's available to all of those. I'm not aware of a lot of that sharing back and forth. It's still kind of siloed.
Are there kind of simulation capabilities or other tools that might be useful for helping kind of study kind of multimodal integration?
Yeah, absolutely. There are. There's several companies out there that have it. Our initial operations in New York, I will say, in my opinion, will be relatively seamless because we have a very extensive helicopter route system. Those were all designed around noise and operate independently of the normal flow of traffic. So from that standpoint, and again, this is Manhattan and a few other destinations to our major airports, pretty seamless. But again, as we start to grow, the industry starts to grow, it's going to be a little bit more complex to get those those eVTOLs from Southern Connecticut to, let's say, JFK or Newark. And that's really where this automation will help us.
Well, and these days people are starting to use digital twins. I think that's a perfect way to kind of like model and test out different things and see if it'll work. Also, Adam, if you don't mind, I want to just go back a little bit to whoever asked the question about the size of the aircraft and how many passengers. You touched on this a little bit, but if you go back to your very first slide that had the definition of AAM, it's not all eVTOLs. So we are also talking about electric aircraft and hydrogen aircraft, which Washington State is very proud that we've got a lot of those going on. So Aviation with the Alice aircraft, I think that's 9 seats. So that whole 9 to 30 passenger seat, I think, is exactly what smaller communities are losing right now. So there is AAM filling that gap.
And Aviation is going to operate out of JFK. They have a partnership with one of the airlines there.
So I have one more data question, then we're going to kind of move on. On the surface transportation side, a lot of local governments have kind of partnered together to kind of collaborate around kind of mobility data specification, which is kind of a common set of APIs to kind of share data between kind of the public and private sector. I guess kind of broadly speaking, what kinds of data standards, should be looked at in terms of advanced air mobility? Should, AAM kind of fall under MDS? Should stakeholders collaborate regarding kind of maybe a new data standard for AAM? Can you kind of touch on that?
Well, I'll start. Joby's a software company too, right? Probably more so than a lot of other things that we do. And, with any product you're building, you need to understand the requirements. Mm-hmm. And I will say that while MDS is an interesting software suite, I'm not particularly sure what the requirements are, let's say in terms of the information that's needed and why it's needed to support decision-making by local authorities. Look, it's no surprise also, I came from Uber, mm-hmm. and a couple of years ago there was a concern about MDS and de-identification of our customer data. You're going to need, whatever you do, an even higher level of safeguards for air mobility. Let me explain why. Especially in the early days, there's going to be a much smaller number of people that will be using these products. So that just off the bat makes the de-identification problem that much harder. Second, they're probably going to be coming from specific areas to other specific areas. They may have certain economic characteristics. So all of this really speaks to, of all the requirements, a need for privacy, data privacy, to be right at the top of the list.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And our focus is we want advanced air mobility to be for everyone. We understand that initially it may not be, but we do expect that eventually it will be open to everyone in the city and the suburbs of New York. About the data, we did see a presentation from a company who did track cell phone data and showed the movement of people from Long Island, New Jersey, in and out of Manhattan. And it was pretty eye-opening. They actually identified the need for 12 vertiports within, let's say, a 20-mile radius of Manhattan. 12. And that was roughly 1.8 million passengers a year. That was their estimation. Because it's not, unlike it's not a rural area, it's just the fact that that short distance takes you that long to get there.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and maybe just considering all that's been said, I do think that there is a need for accountability from the operators of these aircraft, just like there is today, when it comes to compliance with agreements, let's say, with local communities, with respect to noise, right? I think that we all anticipate that if there's new infrastructure that's being developed, the criteria when it comes to noise is going to be even more strict than the criteria that we have accepted from heliports, right? This is meant to be the differentiator between a heliport and a vertiport, should be the noise. But like I said also, not every aircraft is as quiet as Joby is. Making sure that cities are able to see, conformity with those noise abatement plans is probably going to be important.
So
TBD.
There have been a couple comments or questions that came up regarding kind of rural use cases. There's been kind of a note that we've talked a lot about kind of urban in this case. So for rural communities, what do you kind of envision as kind of some key opportunity areas and maybe some areas that you're looking into?
I know for us, it's connecting us to the resources that are in those communities. So whether we're talking jobs, services, even just recreation, right? So it's connecting us to those communities. If we look at where we're at, we're in Washington State, where I'm from, it's very undisturbed with all of that. And even if you're just trying to get grandma to the hospital, if she needed to go to UW Medical Center in Seattle, you're looking at putting an elderly person on the road all day long to do a major drive, trip, all of that. If you have access to advanced air mobility, you can change all of that quickly. And now you're talking a 35-minute flight, very easy on the person. And so you're getting access to resources and quality of life, really. So there's a very, well, I'll just say it's just a very much a quality of life issue. And then there's the economic benefits that come to it by getting our young people access, and old people too, access to jobs in those communities. So people can enjoy the quality of life by living in a more rural environment, but then still access the jobs and resources that are in those dense urban environments.
Let me just throw out a funny thought about this. You all are going to laugh, but when I think about people that live in rural communities that I talk to, going to the city for a shopping trip is a big thing. So I can envision a vertiport in the Walmart parking lot. You know, it sounds ridiculous, but that's where people need to go. And, you know.
Yeah, when we start looking at that, I mean, I realized when I was in college, people don't normally say going to town unless you're from a very small town. But that is what it comes down to. So I think there's a real opportunity there where you're looking at isolated communities and areas. And Washington State is unique because we do have a lot of geography that limits us in that area, where we have Puget Sound, which splits a lot of western Washington. You have the Cascade Mountain Range, which separates eastern and western Washington. So you have a lot of constraints there. And so you have these isolated communities that are 15-minute communities, but it's because that's just how it is. Everything is within 15 minutes because that's the way it is. So.
You know, there's a lot of manufacturers who are looking at this problem because it has differentiated requirements, right? And they're developing platforms that are intended to meet those requirements, whether they're looking at, you know, small drone delivery or, you know, my colleagues, former Elevate colleagues, are down at Whisper Aero down in Crossville, Tennessee. They're in that community. They know what that's like to get from Crossville to Nashville, and it's hard, and they're very disconnected, but they're right on a local airport, right? Well, that informs requirements. We need to have fast aircraft, right? We need to have aircraft that have significant payload, because you're probably not just bringing yourself. And they still need to be quiet. You know, I'm really excited by manufacturers like Whisper who are, you know, taking that challenge on specifically. I hope that, you know, should we find success with our mission, we're able to build product families that can also serve those purposes too. You know, I think that we have to remind ourselves, right? I don't use a single type of aircraft for every purpose and every mission, right? I use my large jets to fly me across country. I use my, you know, utility helicopters to lift, you know, heavy loads. You design requirements for your aircraft around the mission, and you know, I'm excited. There's, I think, a huge opportunity space still for fast aircraft that are hybrid, maybe electric, or, you know, hydrogen being on the 7-year-ish time horizon.
So my final question, and then we'll do kind of a wrap up here. What are some strategies to build institutional readiness and also public readiness as well? And actually, I should probably say public confidence.
You know, I think one thing I'm seeing is, as an aviator, as an airport manager, there's still a lot of people that have not heard the term advanced air mobility. And I think we really, as a complete industry, need to be focused on trying to educate people about what this is and what's coming, because as Ann alluded to earlier, a lot of people think it's science fiction when we're talking about this, and they think, that's, and the aircraft are out there. Joby is flying this aircraft probably today somewhere, and it exists. And I think getting it out and kind of working on that public relations component. We're all advocates for aviation, and getting out there, advocating for it, talking about those positive use cases, and then letting people see it, touch it, feel it, hear it. all of those things where if we can get that, I think that will help make it a reality, because I know I've watched that Joby video a million times and I've shown it to hundreds of people probably, no exaggeration on that. And maybe not the million part, but the hundreds of people showing that. But I've shown the hundreds of people that video, and it has changed minds. When they see how quiet it is, and then they go, oh, okay. And it gives them a pause where they're like, wow, that is cool. They didn't even know it existed. And so I think we have a big challenge there to advocate for it.
I think first and foremost, Joby realizes that every community and every stakeholder is unique and has different needs and different problems. And to a hammer, everything's a nail, right? And we're probably not the nail they're used to seeing. And so if we're even recognized as one. Look, the relationships that we're building here, I think is really important. As I've said, I know for the 100th time, New York is a very important place for us, but so are, the other opportunities that come beyond that. It really is going to come down to getting the aircraft out, though. Got to certify it, got to deploy it, got to put it on meaningful missions, got to give people the experience, got to give people the opportunity to experience it. The New York flight was enormously impactful for us, but I got to tell you, it was a small orbit.
Right.
It was not very far,
Oh, yeah.
it was not very fast, not very high. It was just a very, very local demonstration. Now, it was thrust-borne flight the whole time, which is very impressive from a noise perspective, and it gives you the opportunity to see beyond it. But I'm looking forward to, in the first half of next year, our Agility Prime Air Force partners would like the aircraft to come to MacDill down in Tampa. Well, that's 9 miles away from a general aviation airport right in downtown Tampa. Finding opportunities to fly A to B missions with this aircraft near people in Tampa, that's going to be really important. But we're focused on execution. We got to get over the finish line.
And that's exactly what we're working on in Washington State. Even though I've talked a lot today about serving rural communities, right now we're working on developing some kind of demonstration vertiports that aren't part of my vision, but they will be in population centers where people can see and go, oh yeah, I could do that.
Yeah, our vision is, that's why I think demo flights are important, right? That's one thing that we're talking about, because it gives people a realistic view. Oh, this is actually flying now. It's not just a pie in the sky type thing. But we all kind of touched on it, and I think this is the most important part, is including the communities in the discussion. Get out there, brief it, as much media coverage as we can get to get that word out. We've even talked about having a static display, right? So people can go up, sit in it. What does the future look like, and when is the future? I mean, that's important to get out there.
Terrific. Well, this has been a great conversation. I'd like to invite up our rapporteur, which was Vishwa. I probably should have mentioned it at the beginning. My apologies. But he's an aerospace research scientist with Crown Consulting who works at NASA Ames. And he's going to present kind of a summary of the key takeaways from the session. As he comes up, though, I do want to thank all of our panelists for joining us today. So we do have a coin to thank you for joining us. So thank you.
Much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, it's nice.
Thanks, Alan. Thank you.
And I'll turn it over to Vishwa for our kind of final wrap-up.
Yeah.
Okay, wow. It feels good to finally get to the end of this. It was a vision about a year ago, and we now have a conversation which has started. So thank you, Adam, for really running the show here. And I put together a little summary based on the discussion today, and these are some takeaways for people to now act on things we have discovered or we've got to know a little bit more. Definitely not an exhaustive list. There's a lot more that was covered. Always open to that. So just to quickly go through that, some of those challenges we identified. One was, of course, which was repeatedly pointed out, There are a lot of community challenges, especially communities that have limited access or no access in certain areas, like Anne was pointing out earlier. And an opportunity that exists, that there are a lot of airports across the country which are not used so much or also going out of use to leverage that and kind of answer that access challenge. Then there is the whole challenge of community acceptance as aircraft flying over people who do not use them. Why should they bear the cost of it, in terms of the noise or anything of that sort? Of course, if we can cater use cases more to what the communities can derive use from it, that might help leverage some of that acceptance challenge. Another challenge, of course, that was identified was the business models, who's going to pay for this, right? Of course, there is a lot of existing short distance demand that Ralph also pointed out. There are also existing GA use cases. And it's interesting, I just think of this actually locally, even in Bay Area. It is actually, and this might surprise people, it's cheaper to take a car to, for example, Oakland, fly a Cessna to Palo Alto, and then take a car to somewhere in Silicon Valley, than to actually take an Uber from North Bay to South Bay today. No new technology needed. This already is cheaper and faster. But it doesn't happen because people don't know about it, or the agencies haven't thought of it as a service, right? So that's an interesting opportunity out there. Of course, that brings me to the disconnect between agencies that was pointed out. And of course, Ralph said this whole thing, which is going on now, actually, I think it's happening now, the whole internal restructuring and refocusing and connecting the different modes and redefining policies. Of course, there's a need to identify and meet the energy needs. So new form of transportation brings its own energy needs, all the different kinds of new renewable energy sources. And how do we leverage that, but at the same time not make it overwhelm this new system, right? And of course, Centralia, I'll mess up the name of the airport, Chehalis-Centralia, right?
Chehalis-Centralia.
Chehalis-Centralia. I knew that. So that's a good example of using airports maybe as energy nodes. I know there's discussion about this even at major airports like SFO and even in DC. There is a discussion about making them into energy nodes where multiple modes can connect and use them to recharge and connect the passengers and cargo. Of course, a lot of other challenges were identified. I put a little short list here, the whole data sharing between the different modes of operation, new simulation capabilities needed to really analyze these integration challenges, division of roles and responsibilities that Ryan was pointing out somewhere near the end there. Next slide. So I kind of identified a few research directions which people can take forward and work on them. So one of the things, of course, is there are 3 different flows that integrate at some of these airports, or in general with multiple modes, right? The passengers or cargo, let's say, the vehicles, which will be the different modes, and the energy, which runs the whole system, right? So how do you integrate them seamlessly? We need a new research to understand the design and development of what's turning out to be mobility hubs. Of course, the data collection and dissemination frameworks, new data standards, so that the different modes don't have a mismatch between the kind of data they share and collect. New models for multimodal demand and the econometrics of it. This is an interesting one, use case specific aircraft capacity assessment and design. So it's very interesting, right? When we think of urban mobility, all OEMs have a 4-seater approach to it, and as Ryan pointed out, it makes sense for a particular use case, right? But if you look at other traditional ways that transit systems or air traffic, conventional air traffic is designed, you put the vehicle sized for the demand you're going to meet, which we haven't really done for AAM, right? Or we haven't traditionally thought of it that way for AAM, but it's doable. For 50-mile market, I don't know, it's 4-seater, maybe the best, but there are 100-mile markets for communities which are disconnected, and maybe a 50-passenger aircraft works, right? So just identifying a full framework to how to do this need-based aircraft design. Of course, these things will cause changes to land use and what new regulations and standards would be needed, like Anne pointed out earlier. And of course, to continue to define and expand the opportunity space for multimodal AM with, again, traditionally disconnected or use cases that have value, but aviation is not even thought of for helping that use case. That takes me to the last slide here, which is kind of the next future steps. Like I said, this was the first activity Adam said earlier from this whole AAM task force. We have a couple things coming up. So there is a joint special issue on AAM integration into multimodal transportation systems. This is a special issue between 3 journals: AIAA's Journal of Air Transportation, IEEE's Intelligent Transportation Systems, and Informed Transportation Science. The call has already been released. You can submit to any one of these journals. And there is a joint guest editorial board which will select and release it in all 3 journals. There's also a special technical paper session scheduled for SciTech next year in 2025. Like I said, this is the beginning of the conversation. One of the things which drove all this is the communities which can really make this happen tend to be rather disconnected, like even Adam pointed out. A lot of the panel is aviation, but we are talking multimodal. Where are the surface people? Where are the ferry people, To kind of start conversation in that direction, bring different communities together to talk and come up with solutions. This was, of course, a beginning of it, and we expect to continue with more panels and workshops in future. So please stay engaged. Also, another way to stay engaged is whatever you are organizing as participants, include multimodality in your calls. For example, if you're collecting research for air transportation, put it out there. Hey guys, can this use case be thought of in a more multimodal setting? Of course, we are open to suggestions and ideas to how to take this further forward and expand more on this, so you can reach to any one of those 3 emails. And thank you again on that note for really starting this conversation. I don't know how to call this an end. This is a start. Thank you.